Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Wow, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Good evening. It's the 1st of October, and we've got some fun stuff for you. A Irish court has ruled that Subway's bread is not bread. In fact, it's got roughly a 6-inch sandwich has roughly the same sugar content as an Oreo cookie. So I'm not sure what to call it. It's not a bread sandwich anymore.
It's like something you would deep fry and sell at a state fair.
The reason you smell funny when you go in and leave that store.
It's really a pastry shop.
Yeah.
Eclairs with the banana peppers in them.
Oh man.
Meat and pastries don't sound so good. Say it like that.
A cake with turkey and cucumber filling.
And I mean, Americans love their sweets and meats together because, like, I do too. In that breakfast, yeah, pancakes and sausage or bacon. But when you say it, it doesn't sound appetizing like a pastry and meat shop.
It's like putting a sausage inside of a, I don't know, what would it be? I guess you know what? It doesn't sound that bad to wrap sausage in baklava.
It's not.
That doesn't sound too bad, actually. Sounds like it would be very, very savory.
Especially with an egg or two in there.
Oh, put some eggs in there. Put it, like, heat it up in the oven with some aluminum foil.
Oh man, it's one thing. Like Burger King used to do that whole. It was like a pancake breakfast sausage sandwich in the mornings.
What was it like? The bread, the quote unquote, the bread of the sandwich was like pancakes, right? It was like a maple. Yeah, I remember that.
God, what are those things called? Those things would put me to sleep.
They were McGriddles.
McGriddle, that's it.
Oh, some McGriddle. It's
like a full day's worth of calories in one sandwich.
Probably in like half a sandwich, except it's like so much sodium and sugar that it would like put you to sleep immediately because it would raise your blood pressure.
Yeah, I used to eat them at first, and then I looked at how many calories were in them, and I never ate them again just because it's like, oh, you can't do it once you see how many calories are actually in one. You can't even eat one when you actually know. It's like
I remember like that was like a sleeping pill. I would still be up from driving home from the rave, swing into Burger King, grab the McDonald's, grab the McGriddle, and by the time I got home, I'd be ready to go to sleep. It would knock out any remaining sensory overload. God, I haven't thought about that sandwich in a long time. Well,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say. So the thing that's interesting about this is that Subway's bread contains 5 times Ireland's limit for the ratio of sugar and fat to flour. It's got to be it can be no more than 2% of the total weight of flour in the dough, and so they've got 5 times the weight of sugar in their dough, and so this prevents them from being classified as a staple food item. And so one of the franchise owners in Ireland, his argument was that the restaurant was not required to meet the standard on-the-go items such as heated sandwich and teas and coffees. And that was their argument. We're not required to meet the standard.
Yeah, it's crazy because, I know when you make bread, you need to put sugar in some recipes to brown the outside. It caramelizes, but it's not a whole lot of sugar usually. And to hear that there's that much sugar in Subway's bread loaves is very disturbing because I'm wondering, what's the purpose of putting that much sugar in? Is there some sort of mandate, that they're getting a deal, a tax write-off or something to you? Because it just doesn't even make that much sense, really, because the bread's not that good. Jimmy John's bread is really good for being just plain-ass bread, but Subway's bread is just not that great. So for them to be loading it up with that much sugar, I'm just like, what's the purpose?
Makes me wonder who they tested the bread on.
Right.
First. Those surveys, those focus groups. How do you like this bread? How do you like this bread? Well, we're not even calling it bread. We're just calling it sample A, sample B. We're presenting you with samples today. Who wants some free samples? Not even calling it food. It's just a sample.
Ugh. Ugh. The whole sandwich is the sample size.
Have an extra large sample.
It's it says that a Subway sandwich has roughly the same amount of sugar as an Oreo cookie. A 6-inch white bread roll from Subway has the same sugar content as a fucking Oreo.
I'm looking there. It looks like there's no sugar in Jimmy John's bread at all.
I just think about all those claims about losing weight on Subway.
Well, the thing. Okay, so Jared went to IU, and one of our friends, Devin Devine, she worked at the Subway that he lived above. And the trick to that whole story is that he lived on the 3rd floor of an apartment building directly above Subway, and he would go down there and get like 3 or 4 foot-long sandwiches. So it wasn't necessarily the sandwiches that did it. It was walking up and down fucking 3 flights of stairs multiple times. He was getting exercise. It wasn't just, a dude losing weight by eating a single 6-inch Subway sandwich every time. It's nuanced in the sense that, they leave out the whole climbing stairs part.
In the advertisements, though, I remember, they were like, and by eating Subway sandwiches and with a lot of walking, I was able to lose however many pounds he lost. So they say it in the commercial. They just don't tell you that he's walking up and down stairs however many times a day.
Yeah. And, I don't really feel bad about revealing that kind of information because that guy was a fucking pederast. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
It's nice to know that Jimmy John's doesn't put sugar in their bread because their wheat bread's actually pretty good. But I can't support Jimmy John's because their owner likes to go and shoot tigers and lions and elephants and take pictures on sharks nude.
That's an interesting fetish.
Yeah. So I won't consciously pay for a Jimmy John's sandwich, but if somebody gave me one, I'd totally eat it. I'm just not going to give them my money.
You take one of those free samples?
I feel like a Jimmy John sample size is much smaller.
I get it, but I just like Jimmy John's bread.
Yeah, their bread is good.
Make my shit at home, but I still get Jimmy John's because, yeah, fuck that guy, but I still like the sandwiches.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hear you, man. I like the sandwiches. I just don't want to give that guy any money.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we didn't live in a country that was ran by white supremacists that did that shit like to actual people, I'd be more concerned. with like boycotting, but it's like really hard to like boycott everything.
Yeah, it really is.
Then you end up like, I mean, we end up growing some of our own food, anyway, but you can't grow everything,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, it's like, man, like 3 companies own everything. So when you try to boycott them, you end up fucking buying shit from them anyway.
Yeah, it's
Fuck.
true. Who owns Subway? Is Subway part of the McDonald's Frito-Lay's Dorito network?
Probably. Disney probably owns it. Fuck it. Who knows? Disney owns everything. They probably own fucking Subway and as a subsidiary of The Simpsons and Fox. Who knows? Right, yeah. Brought to you by Disney. Like, Disney owns everything now. I mean, I remember it's like Subway is one of those weird franchises. It's like really cheap to get in, but it's really difficult to get in. So it's like I don't think.
It's owned. It's privately owned.
Yeah.
Let's see, by Fred DeLuca and Peter Buck. No, those are the founders. Why doesn't it say? Oh, no, those are franchisers. Yeah, it's just they're all franchises. God, what a clever pyramid scheme they've got going on though.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because then many years ago, when you like don't understand how nepotism works and how patriarchy is not built for all men, you like looking to try to start a Subway business and you're like, oh, this is not attainable for a regular ass person. So then you're like, oh, I guess I'll try to work at a Subway instead of trying to own one.
Yeah.
So the franchise, while it is seemingly attainable, it's really not. It's like again, it's privately owned, but it's a private club type thing where they let you in and approve you. You can't just buy your way in. They got to let you in, even though you literally buy your way in. Fucking patriarchy, man.
The Irish Supreme Court ruling has already made it into the Wikipedia for Subway. This this article is a day old.
Does this mean Subway's has already or will have to like trademark the term bread if they're going to use it because it's not really bread?
Oh, wow. I don't think you can trademark the word bread.
Maybe that's why they did that in the first place, because they joked about that shit on Community.
Yeah.
Maybe that's literally why Subway has had that literature about their units of bread being called bread instead of rolls, because they refer to them as bread. Like, you get your sandwich on a loaf of bread,
Or like just a bread.
or I mean, whatever they did it in the literature, but by calling it that instead of a roll, they're getting around it not actually being constitutionally bread by just calling it bread. It's like the definition of lipstick on a pig.
Oh man.
I mean, and that's where
Next thing you know, they're gonna trademark meat.
What's
right.
crazy is they must have been sitting on this information for a long time because the technology to figure this kind of thing out has been around for like over 20 years.
Yeah, they sure. I'm sure they have. Again, there's a lot of things in our economy that just get covered up because too many people are vested in them, and then it like will shed light on other things, because then once you realize, oh, they just put all this sugar in this bread and nobody knew for this long, what else has all this sugar in it for no reason? And then you start looking at like Doritos. And
Dude,
what?
Fucking
Doritos.
everything has to
milk.
sugar.
Milk contains sweeteners now.
Milk has a lot of sugar in it.
But now they don't have to. Now they don't have to list aspartame as part of in the ingredients. They put fucking aspartame in milk, and they don't have to tell us.
Yeah,
That shit causes cancers. Like, what the fuck?
You know, sugar is not healthy in massive. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily healthy in any dose, but in massive doses, it's unhealthy. And sneaking all this sugar into people's diets, it's it's criminal. And that's kind of where again, I'm looking at it from the perspective of they just put it out there, and it's the individual who goes there every day because they don't really. I mean, they have a choice, but it's increasingly difficult to be able to provide for oneself and also have time to make food for yourself.
Yeah.
So then in that reality, expecting people to be able to navigate what is loaded with sugar unnecessarily because you can't taste it, then it becomes this land, you know, everybody has to fucking dodge landmines just not to get a heart attack because you were trying to survive because you have to eat. It's like, oh, you think you're getting a healthy turkey sandwich and there's 25 grams of fucking sugar in the goddamn sandwich somehow.
You just drink a 12-ounce Coke.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your mouth is dry because there was so much sodium, so then you have to actually drink a 12-ounce Coke.
And then even if you do drink a bunch of water with it, it's going to get retained.
Yeah. Yep. No, so then it becomes this cycle of people loading up on sugar and sodium and carbohydrates and water and then being too tired from having to process all of that shit to be able to move and burn it off over and over. So this cycle then is nobody's fault because Subway's selling you one sandwich at a time.
Well, it's like Dasani, the water brand pushed by Coke. They include magnesium sulfate in their bottled waters, which leads to thirst.
Oof.
I mean, that's just crazy. They put an additive in the water that makes you need more water. I mean, it's quite brilliant, but it's also really just fucked up.
A thirst for water, leading to a greater thirst for water. A thirst that is never quenched.
I always thought Dasani tasted weird anyway.
It does.
It tastes right to me.
A lot of bottled waters taste kind of weird. And I think once in the past we were talking about the raw water trend.
Oh. For those that forget or don't know what the raw water trend was, it was just people getting water from any source they could and pretending that it was healthy because it hadn't been, cleaned with chemicals, hadn't been processed. But that also includes, groundwater that may include gray water.
And amoebas.
Yeah.
Parasites and
Well, there was a brain-eating
living
amoeba that
beings.
they found in the water in Texas.
Yeah.
you can get like flesh-eating bacteria from water that mixes with water that's been stagnant for a while.
You can't be fucking, I mean, all kinds of worms and shit. You can't fuck with water, man.
No, well, that's like fucking with nature, basically. But it's not even like fucking with nature anymore because humans have just fucked up the environment so tremendously that it's like, there are different grades of water that exist now. It's like there's potable water, there's, non-potable water, there's, and then there's like subdivisions of, the water that's not potable. There's different kinds of water that are potable, but now we're talking about additives to potable water. That, what are the longitudinal studies on adding those kinds of things to water? It's weird. It's just so weird. It's like, what kind of scientific research was drawn upon to be like, yes, let's add magnesium sulfate to our product so that this whole generation of people can get exposed to magnesium sulfate in gradually increasing doses depending on how much bottled water they purchase, plus the plastic leaching into it. I mean, and then like the microparticles of plastic that we're learning about that's in water. That's just crazy too. And then also the micro beads from various soaps and shampoos and body washes that end up in the groundwater as well. That mixes in with everything else.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you add something to water to clean it, how does that not do the same thing in the human body?
Well,
Cause some
I think
pro-
it depends on the chemical, and there may be chemicals that are in certain quantities enough to purify water. Because I know what's in the water purifying tablets in those
I'm
survival kits.
like I don't
Iodine.
process, but I don't
Yeah.
believe that it stops and is completely inert by the time these things enter your body. And that's what I'm saying. Like I don't buy that shit using additives. It's the same reason the Corexit shit that they thought was cleaning the oil in the Gulf ended up having way toxic results. They say this shit and they just bullshit their way through and they don't fucking know what the fuck they're talking about, man, in a lot of these cases. And that's kind of where we have all these old people who like bullshit their way through everything and then they're like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna add this stuff to the water and clean it." And then you're gonna drink it, and it's not gonna do the same thing, even though you're fucking 70% water.
Well,
Like, hold up, really?
it's like old people who are once young people who bullshit their way through everything until they were old people bullshitting their way through everything.
Right. They just got lucky, man. And they think because they fucking somehow cockroached their way through this bullshit, they can just keep lying to us and we're gonna keep taking it. Like, no, man, I ain't drinking your fucking additive water bullshit because that's what you're slipping that shit that's gonna make me keep drinking it because I'm now getting more thirsty and
And I'm so confused. I'm so confused as to why after I finish, a bottle of this water, I want
oh,
not just, to sit down or to relax in the shade. I want another bottle immediately. I have to have, it's like an addiction thing. It's like a subtle addiction thing. That's what it is.
there's
It's like behavior modification.
it is, and there's so many reasons that should be illegal, let alone the behavior modification aspect. But if I sold, if I opened up a burger joint and put cocaine in the burgers so that people can burn that shit off and got hungry immediately, and it was like, oh, these burgers are addictive and they make you hungrier because there's a tiny bit of cocaine in them. That shit would be, I mean, even if obviously cocaine is illegal, that's like uh, a misdirection of what is being sold to then create a dependency in your user or your customer.
That was the case for Coca-Cola for quite some time. There was actual cocaine in Coca-Cola.
And that's where again that it just happens to be cocaine, but that type of behavior modification alone should be illegal, let alone in any aspect, whether it's water or soda or food, um, or like the what's it called? Health supplements, lacing them with steroids to give you better results. Like that's
Which
obviously
health supplements are laced with steroids?
almost all of them, bro.
Like Centrum and everything?
I mean, anything that's like coming from China is almost all laced with steroids. They did fucking tests, and it's all just contaminated.
Uh,
So it's this aspect of, I mean, in a lot of the shit in America too. It's not even just China. It's these labs because they're working with multiple compounds. They can't clean them 100%. So then they get cross contaminated, and then they're
uh,
people who are like testing other shit. So then it's like if you're putting out protein powder or nitrous oxide, then those two things combine, and you're gonna get somebody who's like their testosterone level starts going up because they started taking this protein powder that had nitrous oxide in it, and they didn't realize it, and then they're starting to like have things display that they weren't expecting.
that's a
So
lack of quality assurance and quality control.
yeah, and yeah, I see that article that just got posted. It's a huge deal because in fact, Yoel Romero, a UFC fighter, he just won $27 million. I think that's the number because he tested positive in a fight and was able to prove that it was a tainted supplement and he was not actually using drugs. So
Wow,
like
well, good for him.
his yeah, no, he definitely made out, but he just got lucky that he had the resources to actually fight the case because in any other situation, he would have been basically like if it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, he would have lost his career. He would have been deemed a cheater. He would have been completely written out and had to suffer all the consequences, even though it was actually a tainted supplement. But now that we were able to get the chain of custody and prove that he wasn't using and all these things to show that yes, they what they did was they went and bought random samples of the supplement that he was using off the shelf, and the random samples tested. I think 90% of the cases tested positive for steroids that he tested positive for. So that's where it was not just circumstantial evidence. They proved that this one specific supplement had this very specific steroid in it that he tested positive for. So that's where, you know, like I started staying away from the supplements just because I don't know what the fuck's in them as much, and it's like one of these things where yeah, you can't see the lab, you can't see the supply chain.
If it's not regulated the same way as other products, like certain medicines are, then people aren't going to go in and inspect or audit nearly as often or at all.
I mean, but even then, do you like the same way that the water's audited? You mean that they fucking put the
I don't know about no. See that?
like the
No, I know exactly what you're saying here. I know exactly what you're saying here.
is not like the way they audit their shit. They do longitudinal tests and longitudinal studies, but they don't do supplements.
Yeah, right.
Like, FDA does not regulate supplements.
So
So
there are nutraceuticals, and I believe I'd have to look up and see if nutraceuticals are covered, but I know a lot of them say that they're manufactured according to good manufacturing practices, which is a federal regulation for drug products, drug substances. But I don't think a lot of them actually do or have to.
nope, because then they're not actually
It costs a lot of money to
not
maintain.
audited. Yeah.
So when I
So
when I do a cursory search on Google for health supplements laced with steroids, there are articles going back to 2011. Amazon was selling banned steroids posing as supplements. 2015. Was it 2015? No. That's right. That's the wrong one. There's Yeah, it is 2015. In 2015, Purity First had to do a massive recall because they had steroids in all their vitamins and minerals products. Let's see what else. The FDA has this whole page dedicated to tainted bodybuilding products, which I shared on the Facebook feed. And this goes back 2009 for some examples, 2008. So this isn't like a new problem. I think they've been putting shit like this in food and supplements for a long time. It's just we're now in a position where information is easily accessible and we can, you know, warn other people, hey, you know, this thing you're taking might have something you don't want in it.
Well, and it's the same thing with the food sources, you know, because
Yeah.
if the cow you're eating is jacked up on steroids,
And
and
antibiotics.
they're not gonna eat, it's not gonna transfer to you because the cow broke it down. Bullshit, bullshit.
Wait, no, no. People drink Red Bull, and that's derived from a bull testicle extract.
Right? Yeah.
So this, you know, this actually gets back to that whole this discussion we've had about a year ago, I believe, where we were talking about the difference between, um, you know, ethically sourced animals and animals that like, got to live out on the fields and like the Kobe beef, and then versus the slaughterhouse beef and open range beef, and how one spends its entire life in prison basically being force fed, and the other is, you know, massaged daily by their only handlers, and how, you know, that one of them is going to be loaded up with hormones like self-defense fear hormones its entire life, and that's going to affect the quality of the beef and the flavor of the beef. And if there's other chemicals in there that, you know, if people have conveniently convinced themselves that, oh, this is going to be worked out by the time it gets to me, then clearly the consumer doesn't care about this,
I mean, in
or they
those
don't know.
you don't think those fucking enzymes from being constantly terrified and about to be slaughtered transferred to the person too, and then we end up with this docile ass fucking scared population that is not eating game meat, that's not eating animals that are free, are not eating animals that roam their entire lives.
Yeah.
And
No, I mean,
that's again,
I agree with that 100%. I think that the illusion, of course, is that it's not going to get to the person. I think that's I'm agree with you 100%.
yeah. And again, and I think that's the difference between when you eat a game animal that actually lived in the wild, it gives you a different energy. And I think a lot of people don't even ever bother to seek that shit out, let alone try it to know the difference between a McDonald's burger and a deer that was actually wild all its life. Because then this gets back to the pink slime where
Oof.
you know
Uh,
it's actually beef.
I thought, oh, wasn't the pink slime the chicken nuggets?
No, the pink slime is just the meat adhesive they use to make the stuff
Oh,
stick to itself.
that is it. Yeah.
Oh,
It's like a algae protein, I think, or is it algae? Lichen protein? It's some kind of protein.
Which, in theory, I'm not against that at all. You know, it's just a matter of when you have a population that doesn't know that they're eating that and would not be any wiser because they've never sought out actual meat that's lean and that is lean enough that you know if somebody tried to put a bunch of additive in it, there's a I want to say as much meat as Americans eat, like most Americans have never eaten a real burger.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the reasons why that is because so many Americans are educated to think that like these fast food companies and restaurants are in some way like savior like or heroic or friendly or trusted. Like that's the whole branding thing. And they're like the big name machine that churns out the easy to get, food, and they're not educated about nutrition. They're not educated about long-term health effects. They don't have access to, the right kind of doctors or the right kind of health care, or they just don't pay attention. I think there's a whole lot of that, but there's a lot to be said for like quality of education for the masses, really.
And miseducation for that matter.
Yeah, miseducation. Like some people are talking about how, they use this really disingenuous argument that um, educating people about like the true history of this country, like the actual factual, historical, chronological events and the actual moral implications of a lot of the things that have occurred in this country since its inception and before its inception, leading up to its creation and independence, is some sort of indoctrination. And it's not. That's the disingenuous argument. So then you basically have this whole generation upon generation of people who are miseducated, and the true indoctrination is the miseducation.
Which is also why they have to assert that the real history is the miseducation. That's the classic.
Exactly. It's just a bait and switch.
And I think that's also why it's important for people who identify as left not to get involved in those bullshit narratives, and that you can't give them any credence and you can't actually engage in those arguments. You have to call them out and call them propaganda and call them bullshit instead of trying to actually engage with the argument and say, no, this is why it's not indoctrination. Like, no, just this is not 100% indoctrination. It's 100% not indoctrination. You're full of shit, and we're not engaging in that conversation because it's not even a logical debate. And it's difficult, I think, for a lot of left-wing people to know when they have to shut right-wing.
Well, we were lied to about the food pyramid for most of our lives too. I think that was one of those things that, it seemed nice at the time.
People to fuck.
But yeah, you can't eat like a mountain of bread and expect to get a bunch of nutrients like that. I mean, I understand carbohydrates are necessary to produce serotonin, but it shouldn't be the basis of a diet.
You know what's freaking weird about the food pyramid? I remember this growing up with all those lessons about the food pyramid. You have the base. What was the base? The base is like carbs. Is that it?
Is breads and pastas.
Right, breads and pastas is the base, and the tops is like sugars that you should eat sparingly. But now we now we know that there's so much sugar in all these breads.
Yeah.
It's nefarious. It's nefarious bullshit.
Pasta sauce too.
Oh, pasta sauce, isn't that just chock full of sugar?
Yeah.
Unless you make it yourself, you reduce it yourself.
Pasta sauce is, yeah, you got to make pasta sauce is not hard to make. Everyone should work on figuring out how to make it themselves. It's so easy to make, in fact, that you can make it with 4 ingredients, like onion, garlic, tomato, and basil. 5 ingredients, olive oil. There you go. Cook that. A little salt and pepper. Everyone has that stuff laying around or can get it easily. You don't even have to have fresh tomatoes or fresh basil, or, I mean, hopefully you can find a fresh onion and some. But you don't even have to use fresh garlic. You can use minced garlic from a jar.
Sauce. I want to get lost in the sauce.
I'm trying to load the food pyramid up in the image cycle. I feel like it's important.
For context, absolutely. And entertainment.
Yeah.
What's it? McDonald's French fries have what is it? Beef bouillon in them?
Something like that.
I remember there was somebody asking about if they had vegetarian options, if if the fries are vegetarian. They told him like, no, they have beef, like some minimum. I was like, holy shit, why? Like, why? It's a fucking potato, man. Why you gotta put beef, whatever in there? There's no fucking reason, and there's just all these cross-contaminated foods that enterprise organizations are, exploiting wholesale for, and then they're saying, "Oh, it's our secret recipe." Like, no, you don't need to put fucking beef flavor in your fries. Fuck out of here. On no planet do you need that shit. There's no, because you can't taste it. It doesn't taste like beef.
No, it gets deep fried.
Yeah, exactly.
Deep frying pretty much removes all flavor, and replaces it with the flavor of hot oil.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you've got a batter that's loaded with seasoning, it doesn't survive. So recently, Amazon announced that roughly 20,000 of its workers have contracted the coronavirus. And this includes employees at Whole Foods, because it's part of the Amazon food and package delivery network. And there's a little bit of concern for this, because I understand that Amazon has been the backbone for e-commerce in the United States for quite some time, and they have recently implemented their, almost fully realized Amazon delivery network. And so if Amazon has it, then there's a pretty good chance that, I'm sorry, if Amazon has a distribution center within a reasonable distance of your location, they're going to ship it to that facility, and then one of their delivery drivers will bring it to you. And there have only been a few times in the last couple of months where I've ordered something on Amazon and it's shown up by FedEx or UPS or USPS, and it's generally been something that's not facilitated by Amazon. It's not an Amazon direct. It's being shipped from a third party, and they're just utilizing the marketplace itself. But 20,000, I mean, how many people work in Amazon distribution centers? Amazon
million total employees.
What?
Like, I don't know about the distribution centers, but they have 1 million total employees.
And in North America, Amazon has 75 fulfillment centers and 125,000 full-time Amazon employees. So 1/6 of their employees contracted coronavirus, it looks like.
That's crazy. Well, because then they'll use that as an excuse to replace that 1/6 with robots.
Yeah.
And then not increase the, profit sharing for the 5, 6 that are left if they don't demand it. It's the weirdest shit, man, because again, this gets back to that docile ass beef energy.
Docile beef energy.
We'll just
That's like the absolute opposite of big dick energy.
Right, yeah.
It's a band name for sure.
Docile beef energy. That's how you end up fucking working minimum wage your entire life and never fighting back, because you got docile beef energy. Just going to McDonald's every day, eating that fucking slave cow.
Get out of here with that docile beef energy.
Oh man.
Oh man. Yeah. Because again, it's all these people who getting exploited, getting the fucking corona for pennies and peanuts, and then not in a situation where they can strike and actually form picket lines against these fucking douchebags, forcing them to work during a pandemic. It's that docile beef energy, man.
Get out of here with that docile beef energy. That's just that's the quote of the night. That might be like my favorite quote of the day here. Get
Put
out
it
of
on a
here.
t-shirt.
Get out of here with that docile beef.
Well, and I'm about to eat like fucking meat substitute on my shit now anyway. I mean, I still eat meat, but it's to the point where I'm like, man, I just don't eat McDonald's anymore because I know it puts something in your gut that makes you want to go back there the next day or the same day and keep going back and get those fries because
Dude, those
it's crazy.
fries.
You can get the same type of fries, a bag of them for like $2 and make them at home. But there's something about not having to make them yourself that makes you want to go to McDonald's because that thing in your gut that they put in their food. And it's one of these things where, okay, I don't know what percentage of people's thoughts are driven by food, but it's a whole lot. A large percentage of people's thoughts in existence are driven by their drive to eat, what they're going to eat, how they're going to eat, and what they just ate. So there's this element of we spend so much of our lives eating that then the things that we eat can end up having subconscious like control or in some cases conscious control over us. So that's kind of where when most of our populace can't cook for shit, then you see how they try to cook vegetables, air quotes, just boiling the shit and putting butter and salt on it, or microwaving the shit and putting butter and salt on it, roasting the shit and putting butter and salt on it. Everything, all that's all Americans do with vegetables is
Butter and
put,
salt.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
deep
then
fry it.
Salt.
Don't forget to deep fry
Oh.
it.
yeah, and wonder why kids don't like fucking broccoli. And unless you put a shitload of cheese on it, which
There's some great ways to prepare broccoli.
oh yeah,
I'm
Delicious,
I'm
savory
quite
way.
partial to the Chinese method of cooking broccoli, which allows it to retain that crisp density, and it doesn't turn into mush, and it still looks green, and it can hold sauce without just being completely absorbed into whatever you're cooking it into. But
yeah,
stir fry is a little advanced, though.
I think a really simple way to make an appetizing broccoli or broccoli rabe or even Brussels sprouts, just spread them out on a pan, drizzle it with just a little bit of olive oil, sprinkle just a little bit of salt over it, just a little bit, and then put it in the oven for a little while, and it comes out tasting delicious.
My my quick and easy recipe for broccoli is you put it into a pan with like a teaspoon of oil, and you stir it around for a little bit. It doesn't even have to be. This is just any kind of skillet really. You stir it around until it's evenly coated, and then I put on some crushed red pepper and add like 4 ounces of water, not even that, 2 ounces of water, and then I turn the heat up and I put a lid on it. And by the time the water disappears, the broccoli is done. It's nice and vibrant, bold green, not drab military green, but still looks like broccoli. Um, and then that's it. Some salt, crushed red pepper, a little bit of oil. I've tried it with butter, but it doesn't work as well. Butter doesn't get hot enough quick, and it burns basically.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, it can be added to anything.
butter's good if you want soggy broccoli.
Yeah. Oh yeah. or you could just boil the hell out of it and turn it into soggy broccoli.
You know what I like making with butter? Egg sandwiches. I'll fry the eggs in butter, and then I'll put it on. So, and then I'll toast two sides of a bagel, and then I'll do a little bit of the bagel in the butter as well, and then I'll melt cheese over it after putting eggs in the middle. Comes out tasting pretty good. It's very decadent, but I like it.
I think butter and eggs go well together. But I mean, it's an egg cooked like scrambled eggs in some butter is real nice. I'm always concerned when I go to a restaurant and get breakfast, and the eggs come out and they smell like just an oily pan.
Yeah,
They're that's like the standard for any flat top restaurant. I think is they just use the same kind of oil for everything. Once that pan is nice and greased up with the last load of bacon, they just use that for a while.
that's like the IHOP way.
IHOP. So the one time that I remember going into an IHOP, it was in Terre Haute, Indiana, and it was absolutely the cleanest place. Like it was so clean, it was like unnervingly clean, and our server was changing our drinks right around the halfway point. We weren't even able to finish our drinks, and she'd come around and like swap them out. And we noticed that the servers who weren't delivering food were just cleaning like mad. And I'm pretty sure that that was like, that place had been taken over by meth.
Oh boy.
Because it was so, I mean, it was clean, like sanitized, sterilized, clean. The bathrooms were clean. Like you could go in and they were just, they didn't stink. They didn't have anything on the floor. Everything was just nice and tidy, and the sinks were dry. It was really kind of unnerving.
I went into an IHOP once and it smelled like an open sewer.
Yeah, see, that's what I expect an IHOP or a Waffle House, Awful House, or a Denny's to have that kind of smell because my experience has always been that those places are frequented by college students who don't care. So when I go into a breakfast place that doesn't smell like a truck stop or a feeding trough for college students, and it's not those things, it, it just engenders all sorts of other questions.
Yeah, I definitely don't like eating from a place where I can't see their kitchen. Then you end up with like, you know, all kinds of shit backed up in the dishwashing area, and they don't get their shit clean, and that's why you get those random stomach problems from eating out.
I worked at a restaurant like that one time, and the owner was like, "Hey, I need you to help me clean behind this refrigerator." And we moved it, and out from the dark emerged a stank, and it was like the only other time I smelled anything like that was when a neighbor of mine just put raw pork trimmings directly in the trash, and it happened to be during a week when the trash pickup didn't happen. So like a week into this, the thing was flies and maggots, and it just smelled just awful. And that's what it reminded me of. And so something had fallen behind a refrigerator at a restaurant, and it started to smell. But because the place was really well ventilated, it you just didn't notice it until I was right up on it. I couldn't even tell what it was. That's the kind
Yeah,
of thing that I worry about with restaurants where you can't see the kitchen.
yeah, I've been in the exact same thing because then it was oil from the fry like that was popping off the
Oh, rancid oil.
Yeah, and from the fry pan that was then collecting behind the fridge that we then had to clean off because it was, in the same situation. You realize they don't clean these things for years and then have to have somebody come in and do it because there's more problems than just, oh, you can clean this off and wipe it up. Like, no, you have like somebody come in and deep clean the entire kitchen because it's so, an inch, not an inch, but a lot of oil caked up everywhere, not just behind the fridge, but on the walls and on the floors and shit like that. And then you realize, like, oh, people eat here.
Well, that's that's actually not surprising to me, that young people don't have that kind of training to properly clean or care for or maintain a space. I know that I didn't when I was a teenager. As it turns out, the world's largest COVID 19 contact tracing study found that children and young adults were the keys to spreading the disease, that they are, in fact, the super spreaders. And that out of a population of 575,000 people in southern India, um, there were 85,000 confirmed cases of COVID 19. And of that group of people, 71% of the infected individuals did not infect any other contacts, while a mere 8% of infected individuals accounted for 60% of new infections. And this is children and young adults. And so they're finding that, you know, lo and behold, it's the population of people who have the least amount of experience of keeping things clean and maintaining things. Of course, India is a very special case because they have unbelievable population density. That's a country with like 1.3 billion people, I think. 1.353 billion people as of 2018, and it's a landmass that's smaller than China. So and they've had sanitation issues for quite a while, all over the country, and the Brits didn't do anything about it when they were colonizing. So they've got a lot of structural issues to contend with, but they found that it's young adults and children. I think this is an argument for not having in-person school, like a really strong argument. Like these are the group this is the age group that's gonna spread everything, basically. And then we don't know how long any antibody immunity lasts. I was reading about a study where they concluded that people will get the common cold coronavirus, once every year, or somewhere between 8 and 12 months. They'll get it, become reinfected because we don't retain the kind of antibody immunity that would be necessary to prevent reinfection. And there's no reason to believe that this coronavirus is somehow different from the other human coronavirus that are out there.
Well, I'm just wondering what it's going to be like in the winter. As far as the flu season and all that, I don't feel like people are prepared for the regular sicknesses that come with the winter, and then coronavirus is going to be on top of that. So that's kind of where I'm just wondering if we're going to get a winter spike or something. I hope not, but again, we're going into a season where people get sick normally as part of this is a very specific sick season because it happens in the spring, it happens in the winter. So that's where I'm just again wondering.
Yeah. When I was working at music stores, it was always
What that's going to look like. Maybe
it's always the winter when when these kinds of behaviors, summertime behaviors, start to bite people in the butt. Um, my experience has always been that as soon as school starts, that's when I would have to be extra conscious about the things that I touch because, you know, especially at a music store because everything's supposed to be touched. That's where little kids will touch things, and they're always putting their hands in places. And these are these this is the time. I mean, we're heading right into it where I have every expectation that everyone just got comfortable because it was summer. You know, everyone who thought they might be getting sick, they stayed in or they avoided people. But winter's going to happen, and there is no being outside because it'll be uncomfortable in a lot of places. Although, I imagine there's some parts of the country where it's actually going to be comfortable enough to be outside. So, who knows?
I just hope people wear their masks.
You know, with all the reports that have been released about the efficacy of various cloth types and mask types, and you know, we know that certain materials just don't have any. They don't have what it takes. They don't capture the small droplets or the tiny droplets, and definitely don't capture any of the micro droplets. But these things are still being sold. These things are still being purchased by people, and I think that you know, with this kind of information out there, one would either have to be like willfully ignorant of the efficacy of their mask, or they're just doing it for mask theater. And I'd almost rather that people who are doing it for mask theater just be honest about it and not wear the mask because then we could know to avoid them. But the ones who are wearing masks that are made of materials that just don't work, or just kind of, you know, it's a fashion statement, or it's like they're doing it just so that people don't mess with them. It's like that's just making it harder. That just makes it worse for everyone else.
There's also the people who, will walk down a sidewalk that has, multiple people passing each other on it and they have their mask on, but it's down around their chin. Like a talisman. Like that's actually going to keep anybody safe.
The 3M talisman. 3M. Thank you for blessing our masks with your vapor deposition, glass deposition products.
Well, yeah, then I'm wondering if the behaviors from COVID are going to make the other sicknesses better. So it'll be interesting to see if the people that are wearing masks will then get less sicknesses and spread fewer sicknesses this cold season.
You know, fingers crossed on that one because if parents are being responsible and they're trying to minimize exposure for their children's sake and or for their you know their own parents' sake, if adults are doing these things, and there are enough people are doing it to minimize potential for the rise of the super spreader, which I realize sounds kind of like a bad Star Wars or rejected Star Wars name, but if the rise of the super spreader is thwarted, then there's a chance that a lot of the other kind of seasonal illnesses would be minimized. I like this outlook. It's actually has a very hopeful outlook. It's a really hopeful outlook, actually.
I'm waiting for like a self-contained mask environment with like ventilation, one that's not like totally dumb and stupid, like some of the ones that we were seeing early on in the lockdown and when with the onset of the pandemic, but like some sort of, you know, efficient, properly functioning, effective, safe, fan system, something that brings air in more easily but doesn't let things out.
I think once well, it's starting to happen, but now that the testing can happen quicker, it's going to be a lot easier to create bubbles of uninfected people, or at least people who don't have enough antibody or enough of the virus in their blood to show on the test, or whatever body fluid they use. But yeah, I think the masks are one aspect, and the contact tracing is one aspect, and then the actual testing is another. Because then the testing is it's becoming less obtrusive or intrusive. But I think the same way we can have somebody blow in a breathalyzer and tell if they're drunk, once it's that easy for people to be able to find out if they have COVID-19, then it'll be a lot easier to control the spread of it. But I don't know how close we are to that technology being ubiquitous.
I don't know about ubiquitous, but I know we talked about it being in development.
Well, I suggested that Kleenex come up with a way to have a cloth test for various cold or flu where you just blow your nose, and if it changes to a certain color or color range, then you know you've got something. But I don't think that exists. I know that there's a paper test for the flu, for influenza, which means that it's possible to have a paper test, like a fluid based paper test. Just stick it on your tongue for 30 seconds or a minute in the side of your mouth, or blow your nose and then put it in a solution and shake it, and then it changes color. And if it changes color, then you got something. Or if it doesn't change color, then you're fine. Or if it changes to a different color, a certain color, you're good too. There's a way to do these things.
Wasn't there like this statue that was supposed to test whether or not someone was telling the truth? So they would put their hand in its mouth, and if they told the truth, they would they would take their hand out. But if they weren't telling the truth, they would like cut their hand off.
No, but that sounds pretty incredible.
I think no. I'm gonna find this because I know it exists. I learned about it in my childhood.
Truth statue bites hand.
The mouth of truth is a marble mask in Rome, Italy. It attracts visitors who audaciously stick their hand in the mouth. Boca della Verità. Let me share it. There's the wiki in the chat.
Okay. Boca della Verita.
I'm by no means suggesting that people with COVID, put their hand in that mouth.
In that Netflix series Space Force, there was this idea that what's his name? I want to think of it as Michael, but is the general, I guess.
Oh yeah.
He wanted to have a statue that you could virtually shake someone's hand with. And of course, everyone's like, no, I mean, so people are going to spit in it. They're going to put their balls in it. They're going to do all sorts of horrible things to that statue.
Right.
You have a statue on both ends that react to the other side. I mean, it's kind of a cool idea if people wouldn't, fuck it up. Wait, there was a statue in Korea that people broke. Um, um, Statue of Peace? No, it wasn't the Peace statue. Oh yeah, the statue of the ex-president. I want to make sure I can read this. Chun Do Hwan was destroyed. They like beat its head in, crushed it, and broke it. And apparently the artist was like, "No, I kind of like it this way." This is what happens to statues. They get destroyed or they get defaced. Um, People throw paint on them because they don't like it. They put you know, people piss all over them all the time.
It's a risk taken with public displays. You just sort of have to absorb it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like was the Fearless Girl. That one caused a bunch of controversy because they put that up in front of the bull statue in New York. I think that thing's been vandalized multiple times. I think they put like a scarf around it for winter at one point. That's not vandalization though. Um, they put masks on it. I think putting masks on statues is actually kind of cool. I'm for. I approve of that.
I think they castrated the bull.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I think they did. I think they took off its testicles.
Well, yeah, statue kind of becomes part of a public conversation, unintentionally or not. Because once it's in a public space, yeah, even if it's illegal, people have the option to cut the bulls off your testicle or testicle off your bulls.
I don't even know if it was an act of vandalism to castrate it either. I think maybe it was like
Oh,
an executive decision, but that's also part of the public discourse.
oh, they don't want to offend people with
Quite
bull.
possibly. I'm not sure what the rationale was.
Apparently, for the last 30 years, people have been going and having their pictures taken with the bull's testicles next to their head, touching the bull testicles. I've, he, they rubbed the bull's balls, the Wall Street Bull.
It's like the statue of Harvard on the campus at Harvard. They have his toe. People go and rub his toe for good luck in their studies. And his toe is all worn down, or his shoe is all worn down, or something like that. I think. And so, Wall Street's got the bull testicles.
Oh yeah, in 2017, some artist put a urinating dog next to the fearless girl, who was standing in front of the charging bull. So that's like art imitating life, imitating art.
How meta.
Yeah. many statues are just expressions of vanity versus statues that were designed to communicate something more meaningful? I'm sure there has to be some kind of study to this.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of statues end up being vanity pieces because it's, well, I'm sure a significant portion are for honoring someone else, but in that, I wonder if those people are doing that to show, oh, I have the capital to build this statue to honor someone, and it's my interest. So, we don't get to vote on who the statues are, and it's like we have all these statues in our public sphere that none of the three of us had any influence on whatsoever, but they're in our sphere whenever we go out in public.
Yeah.
This is true. This is true.
Well, I guess that makes me wonder, when does a sculpture become a statue? Because a statue has to be made through some kind of rendering process, some kind of fabrication process. They have to build it somehow. But is a statue still a sculpture? Is sculpture?
No, sculpture implies that it's sculpted, and a statue does not. It can be a sculpture, but it does not imply sculpted.
Yeah.
Like a statue can be a bronze
It can be cast.
cast. Yeah, it can be made in multiple ways, but a sculpture is implying sculpted specifically.
Because when I think of like large three-dimensional objects that have some kind of intrinsic meaning, or in maybe even implied meaning, or intentional, or whatever, I think of art pieces. But when I think of statues, and mostly when I think of like vanity pieces, I think of statues of people that are, they might exist to commemorate some person that some other group of people think is important, but they're generally not that special. Like, they don't look interesting. They don't make me think about anything. Whereas when I look at a sculpture, I generally end up having to think about it.
So it brings into question, are all statues? I don't know, like
Are statues pieces of
statues.
art, or are they just monuments?
Well, that brings into question, like, is propaganda art, or is it just propaganda? So I feel like a lot of statues are kind of like propaganda pieces.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, they are meant to make you feel a certain type of way about the subject. So yeah, they're definitely propaganda.
Whereas, a sculpture in an art garden, you basically you feel whatever you're going to feel, you
Yeah.
know.
So a statue then is supposed to make you feel something, um, with an intention of making you feel something specific. But a sculpture is much more subjective.
I feel like with the statue there's probably a motive.
I mean, if it's art, like sculpture itself doesn't imply art. A sculpture is just literally sculpted by hands, and that's it doesn't imply art in the word sculpture.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like the act of sculpting something is not itself implying that the sculpture is meant to be an art piece. Like it's like an art does not result in art pieces necessarily. Like woodworking as an art results in stairs sometimes, and those stairs can be artistic, but they are not necessarily a work of art. Sometimes they are a work of art, but it's this weird line of like, just because something is sculpted does not mean it's art
Yeah.
because of the intention.
So is sculpture a modality with various mediums?
Yes,
Okay, got it.
exactly. Because again, it's like it's the same reason we use that word for body sculpting because it's
Right. So the body is the medium.
right, and it's sculpting. It's creating a specific contour, specific lines, specific gradients. It's it's sculpting, but that does not mean the result is intended to be a piece of art necessarily. And that's kind of where like this gets back to why some what is it, like blue collar endeavors are, they take skill and they take craft, but then they're not considered art because the intention is almost always for serving a specific function, and there's no abstract uh, creative expression as the focus. It's almost always function,
Some
and
kind of
then
utility.
right, and they just happen to add stylistic elements to it, which is why it doesn't necessarily qualify or classify as art, even though then those same skills and tools can then be used to turn around and make something that's completely without function and it's only about form, which is then a piece of art. Which then it becomes, again, is not to say that art can't have function, but this is where things that are made purely for function are then not classified as art most of the time because of that breakdown of intention. Which then gets, then we get the Duchamp, and you take the fucking toilet and turn it upside down, and is this art because of the intention? And that's
Found art. Didn't don't they have that in the museum at IU?
probably, I wouldn't doubt it. But again, that sparks the whole conversation of where
Where does
art comes from. Is it only from the intention, or can art spawn solely from intention? Does there need to be some element of craft that combines with the intention? And there's how these assholes become famous for seemingly profound philosophical musings that are really just them stealing other people's work.
Well, then there's also the saying, they're an artist with a hammer and nail. They're an artist with a nail gun. They're an artist with the sledgehammer. They're an artist with the saw. You know, like I feel like,
I think that's like a technical expression at that point. When somebody has like extreme technical ability with a tool, like it can lead to art. That's, I think this is what Chris was saying. It can, that those abilities can lead to output, which can be called art or referred to art, but those tools and that ability doesn't always do, output art.
The only people who are going to consider it art are specialists in that craft. So it's like, is somebody who builds stairs, they're going to see another master stair builder's staircase as art, but the people who walk on it are just going to see it as stairs.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between, oh, he has art in his hammer, or there's art in those stairs. It's like, yeah, but you have to be a master stair builder to see the art. So that's why calling it art is not, it's appropriate because of the way we use the terminology, but it's not actually art because that's not what it was intended to be. And it's like, it's the same thing with the way Amish build structures. The way they build structures is art, but there's no art in it. It's 100% the
Functional expression of design and execution.
exactly. It's all about the functional expression of the design and the necessities of what the structure needs, and none of it is meant to be uh, elaborate embellishment. And that's like it's not meant to be visual art, but the way they build it is an art, and
So,
that's the difference.
so is that the same idea then as somebody coming upon an abandoned structure and feeling something evocative about it and then taking a photograph of it for an artistic purpose?
I mean, I think that's an example of that intention establishing something from an amalgamation of things. But yes, that person did not build that structure. That structure is not functional, and the picture of it is meant to evoke abstract emotions. And maybe there is a specific emotion, but because there is no function, the product is almost completely only useful as a piece of art that is meant to be examined for philosophical exercise. And that's the difference between something that is art in itself versus something that is art because people see the art in it. There's no function for that picture other than to evoke emotion and philosophical exercise. That is art. That's what it's meant to be. So, by definition, it is art. You cannot define that thing any other way because it has no other function.
Yeah, that abandoned building isn't a picture of an abandoned building is not being used to sell that abandoned space.
Right. It's not a historical document. It's not meant to show anything specific about that space. It's meant to evoke a feeling specifically, and in that abstract existence with no specific function except to evoke emotion as it's designed, it becomes art. And you cannot call it anything else in its essence. Its essence is art. Whether it's good art or not is subjective. It is.
Yeah.
So the object existing independently of the artist is not art until the artist uses a modality and a medium to create a piece of art that represents the physical structure in a way that evokes emotions and philosophical consideration.
Technically, because otherwise, then it has a function. That's why graphic design for video games is not considered art because it has a function that, like, yes, if you take a frame from a video game, it's beautiful, but nobody sells that as an individual piece of art because that's not what it is. It's actually functioning as a video game. It's meant to be interacted with. It's meant to have all these other things done with it besides just stared at and pondered over. So thus it's not just art. It is partially art, but its higher purpose is to be interacted with as a video game. Thus why it's like I I of course as somebody who enjoys video games see the art in them, but the fact that they are meant to be played and enjoyed as a game means it's not a piece of art. Not to say that art can't be a game, but its purpose is not art.
You know, for a photograph to be considered art, it doesn't even have to be like a perfect technical expression. It doesn't have to be a perfect photograph. It and that's the thing is that a lot of really fantastically composed and processed images might not actually become art because the only thing they exist for is to demonstrate technical proficiency or adherence to composition rules. And I think the thing about a photograph, and I'm thinking really of like landscapes and cars. and I've taken plenty of pictures of landscapes and cars. It's actually really easy to take a good picture of a car or a landscape and then go process the crap out of it till it looks completely different. But the thing that prevents those types of images from really, well, especially landscape, but preventing from becoming a work of art right away is that most of the time either they communicate one thing, which is, hey, look at my fancy car, or look at this imagined reality over here. Look how I processed it. And so, to a point, they become about the process as opposed to how it makes someone feel or think. Photography is really weird, though. There are like a lot of traps and pitfalls that could prevent an otherwise fantastic opportunity to create an image from being realized as art in itself. I think that's one of the pitfalls of an image is that like Chris was describing with video games, the visual content might be beautiful and it might be really just has all these elements to it that make it stand out and make it just look fantastic, but there's a context to it and that changes the way that we think about these things.
I'm thinking about when somebody is at a basketball game and they're a photojournalist, do the pictures they take of the basketball game classify as art? Because again, is everyone they take aesthetically pleasing? Probably not. And their job is to document the basketball game. Only one out of a billion shots is Michael Jordan flying through the air with his tongue out.
From the right angle.
Right, exactly. Only one out of a billion shots is that shot. Is that shot art? I mean, maybe, but that's not it was meant to be originally. So until it got turned into a poster or the logo, I don't know if that image is art. And I think that's why when there's not intention of the thing being art, it's always questionable if it is art because it just happens to produce something that is aesthetically pleasing. Like that image of Barack Obama before Shepard Fairey fucked with it was not art. It was just a journalist document of history.
Yeah.
When Shepard Fairey changed it and modified it to specifically inspire people in an abstract manner, then it transcended simply being a photo document of history and then becomes art. It's not even in just the photoshopping, it's in the intentional transformation of the image into what Shepard Fairey's desired intention on evoking an emotion in the viewer, whereas the original image did not have that intention, and it was just a lucky shot that happened to be a good angle. Like, not that if you're a photographer, you take the good angles, you take the good shots, but everyone isn't that image. Everyone isn't that iconic shot, and only one out of a billion end up being that iconic shot that get used and turned into art, which again, it's like, it's not, I don't even think it's art until somebody turns it into art because it evokes something.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point because like with wildlife photography, that's like a version, and sports photography too, where the cameras themselves are selected for their high frame rates, for their ability to just fire off. They call it spray and pray, and especially with birding, where you have giant lenses and you're trying to get one good image out of a bird flying across the water or something like that. Um, it's not even art till it might become art if it's processed for some other purpose. But even if the image itself just is adjusted for contrast and color and uh, midtones and highlights and that kind of stuff, it's still just a picture of a bird that somebody was relying on luck and happenstance to create. There wasn't like um, a coordinated process with the bird. It's like, okay, bird, start flying in 3 minutes. I'm going to start taking pictures. There wasn't even anything weird like that. And so with Michael Jordan, nobody was. I don't think anyone was like, "Hey, Michael, let's do a picture of you in the middle of the game where you jump and do a slam dunk and stick your tongue out, and I'll be right over here. So make sure to look at me." I don't think that happened. I don't think that was. I don't think they could coordinate something like that if they really wanted to. I think it would have ended up failing if they'd have tried to coordinate something like that. It has to happen in the moment. It's like a very unique moment that can't be predicted. It's just the the stars aligned type situation.
Yeah, and it's that unique lightning strike moment that makes those images so striking. And I think that's kind of where, as viewers, we know if we're looking at something that is a unique moment. Like there's that image of Israel Adesanya standing facing Anderson Silva with his hand behind his back, and it's like it's an iconic moment where if that shit was staged, it wouldn't look nearly as cool as it did. But because it was in the moment, the way that the people who are in the shot don't know that the person taking the shot is taking it, and it's a candid shot. That that aspect of being candid is something that the viewer can pick up on because the subjects are not aware of the camera person. And I think again, when people are acutely aware of, there's studies on it. I forget the exact name of the effect. It's not the same as the observer effect, but it's when people know there's a camera watching them, they act differently for a short period. Well, not it's a varying period for different subjects, but after a while, they start to act normal and forget the cameras around. So they've done studies on.
Did we just lose Chris?
There might be a delay.
This very thing. So we know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you just dropped out for a little bit.
Oh, my connection's unstable for some reason. I see.
You were talking about like a variation of the observer effect. It's actually kind of really
Yeah. But yeah, it's not. I forget the exact name of it. It's not called the observer. It's like it's effectively the observer effect for humans. But the issue is that it's not permanent. So what happens is, as people get used to the cameras being around, they start to act more and more normal. So after a while, they start to become desensitized to being observed. So then the period varies for different people. So it's like, maybe 2 hours for one person, maybe 6 hours for another person, maybe days for another person. But after a while, they start to act normal. But as observers, we know when people are showing out for the camera, is what a lot of people call it. If you're showing out for the camera, you go a little more than you normally would, or you're a little more animated, or you may be a little more vocal, or you may be a little louder. But that's where when you know people are being candid in the moment and they are not doing it for the camera, but the camera captures it, it transcends both the photography and the moment, because you don't always get to capture those moments, but that's where those images are so valuable. And again, it's like this weird intersection of usually a very specialized camera as the tool, a very knowledgeable photographer most of the time that knows they have to take a bunch of pictures, and then a subject that is going to do something that is worth taking a picture of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of things have to come together for for that kind of stuff to really work out. I think that's the challenge in with photography is it's always in the composition because the content itself is what matters. It's not really even the processing half the time. I see plenty of images that when I look at them initially, all I think is like, wow, they really blew out the blacks, or man, that red is just completely saturated, or wow, it's just blown out in the highlights completely. Look at those specular highlights; they're just glowing. And I look at it and I see those things, but somebody else might not see those things at all. And so those things just come down to like preferences, processing preferences. And so as a photographer, I'm always looking at that stuff and like, huh, maybe this stuff doesn't actually matter. Maybe these are just trends. Like the whole low contrast, everything looks gray trend was going strong for a while, but I think that's just because people didn't have monitors where they could see accurately. They were like processing on monitors with really high lumen output, really high nits output, or they were working with monitors that had low gamut coverage, so they couldn't actually see the changes they were making. Um, and it really what it comes down to at that point is that it doesn't matter. None of that stuff actually matters. It just matters if people feel when they look at the image. And so that's why it comes down to like coordination, composition, planning, intention, and that's before the image is even made.
Yeah, well, and I think again, this sort of puts into light what it takes for some really good photography to happen. That's, you know, nobody gives a shit about Instagram photos than like however long they're in front of your face because they're not memorable, they're not composed. There's nothing actually. The subjects aren't doing anything that is worth taking pictures of most of the time. So that's kind of where, there's iconic images and then there's Instagram, and people are more concerned with creating Instagram pictures than iconic images, not realizing like you can have like you can have 1,000 Instagram pictures, but if none of them are iconic, even you won't go look at them. Yeah. And I think that the problem is there's a picture that's not iconic is not really worth taking because it's not really worth looking at. And I think that's where people don't understand what pictures are meant for because they're so easy to make now.
Yeah.
Like, nobody cares about your fucking McGriddle. Everybody can get a McGriddle now. If you make a McGriddle, it might be interesting, maybe, but you got to make it visually interesting. Add some color to that bitch. Something. Otherwise, there's no reason to take a fucking picture of your McGriddle.
Does anyone really care about the food that people prepare or order at a restaurant if it's not good looking? I mean, that's part of the reason that that's why people like chefs because not only will they make good food, but they will arrange it in such a way that it makes you want to appreciate it, both visually and I'm not sure how to, because it tastes good.
Culinarily.
Culinarily, yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Gustatorially. I'm thinking about those comparison photos that we see every once in a while posted around the webs of like the official food photography of like the Big Mac and then what a Big Mac actually looks like when you open that.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like with food cereal photographs. They use glue.
Yeah, they use all sorts of stuff on foods for food photography, like glycerin and various
motor oil.
Motor oil.
Yeah, I think motor oil is what they use for syrup.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Most syrup doesn't look like syrup, and it definitely doesn't stay put long enough to take a picture of it. But motor oil, you can get some really thick motor oil. It'll stay put. I remember when I was in this black and white photo class, and I was creating a picture. I was gonna, we were recreating a chalk outline of a body, and I used barbecue sauce for blood. It worked out pretty well. Most people think that blood is red, but if it sits out long enough, it oxidizes and it turns brown. And so, to simulate a body outline, a chalk outline, and to simulate some blood, we couldn't have just used ketchup. That would have been too easy. That would have been too fresh too.
Yeah, didn't Hitchcock use Hershey syrup?
Yeah, he used chocolate syrup in the shower scene of Psycho.
Speaking of like horror films, I've spent like probably an inordinate amount of time like thinking about those slasher movie characters and like what would happen if they encountered like a group of people who really actually knew martial arts or like, you know, um, combat tactics or like, actual Marines or like like some sort of special forces unit like to take these people down instead of like incompetent local police officers and um, teenagers.
I
Yeah,
think
it
it'd be a
really makes
different
you
story.
wonder.
It'd be a totally different story.
Oh yeah.
The in Chinese zombie movies, or they always or ghost story ghost hunter movies. It's always some like martial arts master who saves the day. In a lot of Chinese cinema, it's almost always some martial arts master who saves the day. I feel like if there's any kind of um, physical acting involved, any kind of violence, it's almost always some martial arts. Sometimes there's a sword, but I feel like that falls under the martial arts umbrella. I think it's pretty consistent with a lot of Asian cinema. Actually, it's like a martial artist who saves the day.
Yeah, why do you need anything else if you know martial arts?
Yeah, the martial artist would know to avoid the situation before it happened, or they would be able to defend themselves and get the fuck out. So
Yeah.
so the slasher is not going to go for somebody like that. Somebody who could actually hurt them back. The slasher is actually kind of a pussy and goes after weak prey, weak subjects that are unable to defend themselves. Because if they actually had to go up against people who were, somebody who bit back or somebody who could protect themselves, it would be a very different story.
That's why the Predator movies are great because they're going after the fucking apex.
Oh yeah, they're going after the special forces. But
And, that's I was gonna say that's what makes those movies so terrifying. They're not actually horror films. It's the fact that this thing is like going after the top of the chain. Because
yeah,
then you look at the films and they're not really horror.
yeah. Well, I think Aliens is part of a horror genre, but the Space Marines are just fearless until they realize that what they're dealing with is like nothing they've ever seen before.
Game over, man.
Let me out of this chicken shit outfit. Oh, Hudson, you came up with the best lines in that movie. I think that's actually put the spotlight on a very good example. Predator, that's the kind of slasher that it doesn't matter how prepared you are, that thing is more prepared than you are.
Unless you're Danny Glover.
Shit. Danny Glover got lucky. He got really lucky. So did Arnold. Arnold basically died. Like he barely survived that whole thing. The thing detonated his bomb and he jumped over a hillside and somehow didn't get vaporized. Like Arnold was dead basically. I don't think anyone who actually like survives a predator engagement. I think almost all of them survived on luck, just sheer luck.
Yeah, because it was basically the predators sparing them in a lot of cases. Because well, that's where I still don't think we have their true intention in the movies. Like they've done a lot in the comic books, but the movies are still not very clear about what their long term goals are. They like kind of allude to it, but we still don't know if they're actually bad guys or not.
I don't think they're bad guys. I think they're badasses. They've got incredible technology. Their technology is so much more sophisticated than ours is right at this very moment that it's really hard to fathom how they got there. And but at the same time, like I think that just to drop the bad guy label on them that's really short sighted. They're so much more advanced than we are. It's hard to it's like if ants were to try to judge us, I think.
Well, there's the theory that they're another race that either the engineers created or started at near the same time as the engineers. That's kind of where there's things to imply both or that would indicate both.
Yeah.
But again, it's hard to know because we don't know if the engineers are good either. So that's kind of where our whole notion of good and bad is based on the human perspective. So if the engineers want to wipe out humanity, but they want to seed the universe with life, that doesn't mean they're necessarily bad. They're just bad from the human perspective, which is also why Ridley Scott's universes are inherently better than a lot of other people's because he creates more complex stories.
That's what I mean. Like ants shouldn't be judging whether humans are good or not. It's hard for us to make that kind of judgment about any of the creatures in Ridley Scott's expanded universe. I'm pretty sure xenomorphs are bad because they just destroy and take over and seed more of themselves to kill things, but it's hard to say. It's hard to divine the intent of something that we don't understand, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and something that's been influenced by studio executives that didn't understand it, but also influence it.
Oh man, that's brilliant right there. They didn't understand it either.
Exceptional Radio. Exceptional
Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5. Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.